The holographic display flickered to life in Xenobiology Classroom 8B, casting an eerie blue glow across the assembled students. Professor Kellyan's compound eyes gleamed with what could charitably be called enthusiasm, though on an insectoid face, enthusiasm looked remarkably similar to preparing to devour one's young. "Today, my precious little larvae," Kellyan announced, mandibles clicking with barely contained glee, "we're going to examine apex predators from across the known galaxy." A collective shiver ran through the classroom, which was quite impressive considering half the students didn't technically have spines. Korith, whose amphibious skin could shift colors based on emotion, immediately turned a queasy shade of chartreuse. Glimmer, who was essentially a sentient ball of energy with trust issues, dimmed considerably. Even Thunk, whose rock-like exterior could probably withstand a direct meteor strike, shifted uncomfortably in his specially reinforced chair. In the back row, Jaime stretched and yawned, completely oblivious to the mounting dread around her. She'd been up late the night before video chatting with her family back on Earth, and, honestly, Professor Kellyan's idea of terrifying apex predators was probably going to be about as scary as a nature documentary. She'd grown up in Colorado, for crying out loud. She'd seen actual wildlife. "Now," Professor Kellyan continued, practically vibrating with academic excitement, "we'll start with submissions from your own homeworlds. Remember, the goal is to understand predator-prey relationships and survival adaptations across different ecosystems." Korith raised a webbed hand tentatively. "Professor, are you sure this is safe? I mean, some of these creatures might be quite disturbing to—" "Nonsense!" Kellyan's antennae twitched dismissively. "Knowledge conquers fear, my dear student. Besides, how dangerous could a few recordings be?" Famous last words, Jaime thought, but she kept her mouth shut and pulled out her tablet to take notes. Around her, the other students were whispering nervously among themselves in at least 16 different languages, none of which sounded particularly optimistic about the next hour of class. Wisp, who communicated through controlled atmospheric disturbances, created a small localized breeze that somehow managed to sound concerned. "What if we see something that gives us nightmares?" "Then you'll have fascinating material for your psychology electives," Professor Kellyan replied cheerfully, completely missing the point. "Now then, who would like to go first?" The silence was deafening. Even the classroom's environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. Finally, Clicks, a multi-limbed insectoid, who was basically Professor Kellyan's favorite student, reluctantly raised 2 of her appendages. "I suppose I could share footage from my homeworld," she said, her voice carrying all the enthusiasm of someone volunteering for dental surgery. "But I should warn everyone, the razor moths are quite intense." "Excellent!" Professor Kellyan clapped her hands together, producing a sound like breaking twigs. "Let's see what we're working with." The hologram shifted, displaying a nighttime scene on Clix's desert homeworld. The camera panned across what looked like a peaceful oasis, until something that resembled a butterfly crossed with a chainsaw came diving out of the darkness, its crystalline wings literally slicing through the air with a sound like breaking glass. Half the class immediately ducked under their desks. Glimmer flickered out entirely for a moment, which was her species' equivalent of fainting. Even Thunk made a low rumbling sound that probably meant something very impolite in geological terms. "Fascinating!" Professor Kellyan exclaimed, completely oblivious to her students' terror. "Note how the plasma-edged wings allow for both flight and prey neutralization. And that sound, pure psychological warfare." Jaime watched with mild interest as the razor moth proceeded to hunt what looked like a cross between a rabbit and a disco ball. It was actually pretty cool, in a National Geographic sort of way. She'd seen hawks hunt in her backyard that moved with similar precision, just without the whole wings of literal death thing. "Next," Professor Kellyan announced brightly. "Who else would like to share?" This time it was Korith who reluctantly volunteered, his skin now a nauseating shade of yellow-green. "I have footage of the mire stalkers from the deep swamps," he croaked miserably. "But really, I don't think—" "Wonderful! Let's see those amphibious apex predators in action." The hologram shifted again, this time showing a misty swamp scene that looked like something from a horror movie. Something massive moved beneath the murky water, creating ripples that suggested it was roughly the size of a city bus with anger management issues. When it finally emerged, a creature that looked like a crocodile designed by someone who thought regular crocodiles weren't nearly terrifying enough. Several students actually whimpered. "Oh my," breathed Professor Kellyan, practically glowing with academic fervor. "Look at those adaptive camouflage capabilities. And those teeth, clearly evolved for crushing through even the toughest armor." The mire stalker in the video proceeded to demonstrate exactly that by crunching through what appeared to be a large metallic turtle thing like it was a particularly stubborn piece of candy. The sound effects were memorable. By now, roughly 2/3 of the class was hiding under their desks, and the other third was seriously considering it. Jaime, meanwhile, was doodling in her notebook margins and occasionally glancing up at the display with the kind of polite attention she usually reserved for moderately interesting documentaries. "This is excellent material," Professor Kellyan announced, seemingly deaf to the sounds of distress coming from her students. "One more volunteer before we move on to my special presentation." Glimmer, who had finally managed to reconstitute herself, pulsed weakly. "Professor, perhaps we could move on to something less traumatizing? Maybe study herbivores instead?" "Herbivores?" Professor Kellyan looked genuinely confused. "But we're learning about apex predators, the galaxy's most fearsome hunters. Speaking of which—" Her compound eyes gleamed with something that might have been pedagogical sadism. "I have a very special video to show you all, something that will really put these examples into perspective." She turned to the class display controls, and Jaime noticed her hands were actually trembling with excitement. This was either going to be really good or really, really bad. "Students," Professor Kellyan announced dramatically, "prepare yourselves. What you're about to see comes from a world so dangerous, so utterly hostile to life, that its very existence challenges our understanding of how complex organisms can possibly survive." The room fell completely silent. Even Wisp stopped rustling. "This footage," Professor Kellyan continued, building the suspense like a master showman, "was recorded on Earth, the human homeworld. Every eye, optical sensor, and electromagnetic field detector in the room turned to stare at Jaime, who suddenly felt like she'd accidentally volunteered to be the main course at a dinner party. She said, raising her hand tentatively. "Maybe we should—" "Silence," Professor Kellyan commanded, though not unkindly. "This is for educational purposes. Now, observe the apex predator of Earth in its natural hunting environment." The hologram flickered, then resolved into grainy, green-tinged night vision footage. It showed what appeared to be a quiet, suburban neighborhood. Neat lawns, tidy houses, the kind of place where the most dangerous thing should be someone forgetting to water their begonias. Then something moved in the shadows. The camera focused on a large, tawny shape moving with liquid grace between the houses. It was clearly a powerful predator, muscles rippling under its coat, eyes reflecting the camera's infrared light like golden coins. It moved with the kind of confident, lethal silence that spoke of countless successful hunts. The classroom held its collective breath as the creature, obviously some kind of Earth superpredator, stalked through what appeared to be someone's backyard. It paused near a children's swing set, head tilted, listening for prey. Then it pounced. The attack was swift, brutal, and absolutely silent. The predator's victim, some kind of spotted ungulate, barely had time to react before it was taken down with practiced efficiency. The kill was clean, professional, terrifying in its casual brutality. The footage ended. The classroom erupted in chaos. Glimmer winked out of existence entirely. Korath turned a shade of green that probably wasn't healthy for amphibious life forms. Thunk actually cracked, his rocky exterior developing stress fractures from pure terror. Wisp became a small hurricane of panic, rattling everything in the room. Clicks made a high-pitched keening sound that was probably her species' version of screaming. Several students had activated their emergency beacon bracelets. 3 had actually fainted. 1 had begun quietly reciting what sounded like last rites in a language Jaime didn't recognize. Professor Kellyan stood frozen at the front of the class, her compound eyes wide with what might have been regret, academic fascination, or the slow realization that she might have just traumatized an entire generation of Xenobiology students. In the chaos, everyone turned to stare at Jaime, the lone human in the room, the representative of the species that had apparently produced this nightmare fuel. Jaime looked around at her classmates' terrified faces, then back at the now blank hologram display, then back at her classmates. She yawned, partly from being tired, partly from confusion. "Seriously?" she said, genuinely puzzled. "That's what has everyone freaked out? It's just a mountain lion. My backyard sounds way worse than that on a typical Tuesday night." The silence that followed was so complete, it could have been bottled and sold as a luxury item to meditation enthusiasts across the galaxy. The silence stretched on for what felt like geological epochs. Jaime could practically hear the gears turning in her classmates' minds as they processed what she'd just said. Unfortunately, those gears seemed to be grinding to a halt, rather than reaching any comforting conclusions. Your backyard?" Korath finally managed to croak, his skin now cycling through colors that Jaime was pretty sure weren't supposed to exist in nature. "Sounds worse?" Jaime nodded, still genuinely confused by all the drama. "Oh, yeah, way worse. See, that mountain lion was hunting in the suburbs, so it had to be all quiet and sneaky. But where I grew up, we get bears, coyotes, elk during rutting season." She paused, noticing that several students had begun making what sounded like prayers in their native languages. "Are you guys okay? You look kind of green." "Well, greener than usual, Korath." Professor Kellyan's antennae were twitching so rapidly they were practically vibrating. "Jaime," she said carefully, as if addressing an unexploded bomb, "when you say bears, you're referring to some sort of small, harmless creature, correct? Perhaps a diminutive herbivore with an unfortunate name." "What? No, bears are huge. The black bears aren't too bad. They mostly just get into your garbage and terrorize your pets. But the grizzlies—" Jaime shrugged. "Well, you don't really argue with a grizzly bear. My mom keeps bear spray by the back door, and we have to put special locks on our trash cans because otherwise they'll tear right through them like they're made of paper." Wisp had formed into what could only be described as a small tornado of existential dread. The atmospheric disturbance she was creating sounded like a tea kettle having a nervous breakdown. "Bear spray?" Glimmer whispered, her energy form flickering like a dying light bulb. "You have weaponized chemicals to fight these creatures?" "Well, yeah, but it doesn't always work," Jaime said, trying to be helpful. "Last summer, Mrs. Peterson next door used bear spray on this big male that was going after her bird feeders, and he just kind of shook his head and kept eating. She had to call animal control, but they couldn't do anything until he decided to leave on his own." Thunk made a sound like grinding tectonic plates. "The authorities were powerless?" "Oh, animal control's pretty useless with the big stuff," Jaime agreed cheerfully. "They're better with raccoons and possums, though raccoons are honestly scarier than bears sometimes. Ever seen a raccoon family tear apart a supposedly raccoon-proof garbage can? It's like watching tiny masked vandals with opposable thumbs and a grudge against human society." By now, several students were openly weeping. Clix had curled all her limbs into a defensive ball and was making a high-pitched humming sound that Jaime was starting to recognize as her species' equivalent of hyperventilating. Professor Kellyan cleared her throat nervously. "Jaime, perhaps you could clarify. What do you mean when you say these creatures live in your backyard? Surely you don't mean they actually come onto your family's property." "Oh, all the time," Jaime said, pulling out her phone. "Want to see some pictures? I've got this great video of a mama bear and her cubs playing on our trampoline last spring." The collective intake of breath from her classmates was audible. Glimmer actually flickered out entirely for a moment, which Jaime was learning was basically her version of fainting. "Playing," Korath whispered, his skin now a shade that could best be described as existential crisis yellow. "These apex predators play on recreational equipment?" "Sure. Bears are actually pretty playful. The cubs especially. They're like really big, really strong puppies with claws that can shred steel." Jaime started scrolling through her phone. "Oh, and here's a video of the time a elk got stuck in our neighbor's fence. Danny, that's my little brother. He was trying to help it get unstuck when this huge bull elk showed up. Bull elk during rutting season are absolutely insane. They'll charge anything that moves, and they weigh like 800 pounds. Several students had now crawled completely under their desks. The ones still visible looked like they were contemplating the meaning of existence and finding it severely lacking. Your small male sibling." Professor Kellyan's voice had gone up about 3 octaves. "He approached a territorial megafauna during mating season?" "Well, yeah, but it was fine. The bull elk just kind of snorted and wandered off. Though there was that one time when Danny was like 10 and he decided to pet a pretty deer that turned out to be a moose cow with a calf." Jaime chuckled at the memory. "Mom was so mad when she found out. She made him write an essay about why you don't approach wildlife." Wisp had formed herself into what appeared to be a small, localized dust devil of pure panic. "Your parental unit punished him for surviving an encounter with a territorial maternal apex predator?" "What? No, she punished him for being dumb enough to approach it in the first place. We have bears, mountain lions, moose, coyotes, rattlesnakes." Jaime ticked them off on her fingers. "Oh, and bees. Well, not just regular bees. We get Africanized honeybees sometimes, and those things are nuts. They'll chase you for like half a mile if you tick them off." Thunk cracked audibly. Actual pieces of his rocky exterior were falling off and hitting the floor with tiny pinging sounds. "Venomous arthropods," Clix managed to whisper. "With pursuit capabilities? Technically, they're not venomous. They're—" Jaime caught herself. "You know what? That's not the point. The point is, None of this stuff is that scary once you're used to it. Like, yeah, you have to be careful, but it's just normal life stuff. Professor Kellyan was now gripping the edge of her lectern with all four hands, her knuckles, if insects had knuckles, white with strain. Jaime, when you say normal life stuff, you're referring to coexisting with multiple apex predators on a daily basis. I guess? I mean, they're not really apex predators if there's a bunch of them, right? That's just wildlife. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications that Jaime was completely missing. Finally, Korath raised a trembling, webbed hand. Jaime, he said very, very carefully, what exactly do you consider an actual threat? Jaime thought about it for a moment. Well, there's always humans, I guess. Like, other humans are way more dangerous than any animal. My sister Carmen's in the Marines, and some of the stuff she's told me. Jaime shook her head. But even just regular people can be pretty scary. There was this one time at a Black Friday sale when she was interrupted by the classroom door bursting open. Security Chief Baxon charged in, his reptilian features set in an expression of barely controlled panic, followed by what appeared to be a full emergency response team. Professor Kellyan, he barked, his tail lashing anxiously. We received multiple emergency beacon activations from this classroom. Are you under attack? Do we have a containment breach? Why are half your students hiding under their desks? Professor Kellyan looked around at her traumatized students, then at Jaime, who was still helpfully scrolling through wildlife photos on her phone. We were conducting a comparative study of apex predators, she said weakly. Apex predators. Baxon's pupils dilated. Never a good sign in reptilian species. What kind of apex predators require a full emergency response? Before Professor Kellyan could answer, Jaime helpfully chimed in. Oh, we were just talking about the wildlife back home. Nothing dangerous, just regular backyard stuff. Bears, mountain lions, moose, stuff like that. Security Chief Baxon went very, very still. When reptilians went still like that, it usually meant their nervous systems were trying to decide between fight, flight, or call for backup. You said bears? He asked carefully. And mountain lions, Jaime added, completely oblivious to the effect she was having. Oh, and coyotes. Sometimes they hunt in packs. Last winter we had this whole pack that would come through our neighborhood at night. You could hear them howling and yipping while they hunted. It was actually kind of beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. One of the emergency response team members, a tall, crystalline being, made what sounded like a choking noise. Baxon looked around the classroom, taking in the cowering students, the traumatized professor, and the completely calm human girl who was apparently describing a wildlife horror show, like it was a pleasant nature walk. Jaime, he said very slowly, I need you to come with me. There are some people who need to speak with you about backyard safety protocols. Okay, Jaime said agreeably, pocketing her phone. But can I ask why everyone's so freaked out? I mean, it's just normal Earth stuff. As they walked toward the door, Baxon muttered under his breath in what sounded like a reptilian prayer. Behind them, Professor Kellyan was trying to coax her students out from under their desks, while glimmer flickered weakly in what appeared to be the early stages of an existential crisis. Normal Earth stuff, Baxon repeated to himself, his tail still lashing nervously. Dear ancestors, preserve us all. The Galactic Academy's Emergency Council chamber had seen its share of crises over the years. Diplomatic incidents, academic scandals, the occasional time-space anomaly that required delicate handling. But never in its 300-year history had it been convened to address a single student's casual description of her weekend plans. Jaime sat in the center of the circular chamber, looking around with the kind of polite curiosity usually reserved for mildly interesting museum exhibits. The emergency lighting cast dramatic shadows across the faces of the assembled administrators, all of whom were trying very hard to look official, and not at all like they were questioning their life choices. Dean Morgath, whose crystalline form refracted the emergency lights into prismatic patterns of barely controlled panic, cleared what passed for his throat. "Jaime," he began, his voice echoing with the harmonic resonance of someone trying very hard to sound calm, "do you understand why you've been brought before this council?" "Not really," Jaime admitted, shifting in her chair. "I mean," Security Chief Baxon said, "something about threat assessment protocols and psychological evaluation procedures, but I thought we were just having a conversation about wildlife." The assembled administrators exchanged glances that somehow managed to be both meaningful and terrified. Present in the chamber were representatives from 6 different species, and every single one of them looked like they'd rather be literally anywhere else in the galaxy. "Jaime," said Councillor Velix, whose mantis-like features were twitching with what appeared to be nervous energy. "In your Xenobiology class, you described several encounters with what you termed backyard wildlife. We need to understand if these were exaggerations." "Exaggerations?" Jaime looked genuinely confused. "No, why would I make that stuff up? I mean, it's just normal Colorado stuff. Actually, I was being pretty conservative. I didn't even mention the time we had that family of foxes living under our deck, or the great horned owl that kept hunting in our yard at night." Every being in the room seemed to shrink back slightly. Councillor Theptin, whose gaseous form was usually a pleasant blue-green, had gone an alarming shade of gray. "Perhaps," Dean Morgath said carefully, "you could show us some of these recordings you mentioned having?" "Sure," Jaime pulled out her phone cheerfully. "I've got tons. Oh, here's a good one from last summer." She tapped the screen, and the room's holographic display system automatically synced with her device. The chamber was suddenly filled with the image of a peaceful suburban backyard, green grass, flower beds, a wooden deck with some outdoor furniture. Then, a massive black shape wandered into frame. "Oh, that's Bertha," Jaime said fondly, as what was clearly an enormous bear ambled across her family's lawn like it owned the place. "She comes by every summer. Mom calls her Bertha because she's just huge. Look, she's heading for the bird feeders again." The bear in the video proceeded to destroy what appeared to be a heavily reinforced bird feeding station with casual efficiency, as if it were made of tissue paper and wishful thinking. Councillor Clickson, whose 4 eyes were independently capable of expressing horror, managed to do so with all of them simultaneously. That creature is in your residential area?" "Yeah, Bertha's practically a neighbor at this point," Jaime said, "though she's not even the biggest bear we get. There was this one grizzly that showed up 2 years ago. We called him Tank because he was just enormous. He actually bent our basketball hoop trying to get at something in the garage." The hologram shifted to another video, this one showing what appeared to be a bear roughly the size of a small spacecraft, methodically destroying outdoor recreational equipment. "Your family? Names? The apex predators?" Councillor Velix's voice had gone up several octaves. "Well, yeah, the regulars anyway. It's easier than calling them that bear or the other bear when you're trying to explain to the neighbors which one got into their trash." Jaime swiped to another video. "Oh, here's Danny feeding the deer." The new video showed a young human child, who couldn't have been more than 12 years old, standing approximately 3 feet away from a group of what were clearly large, antlered ungulates, casually tossing them what appeared to be food. Your juvenile sibling. Dean Morgath's harmonic voice cracked slightly. He's within striking distance of multiple large herbivores? Oh, those are just white-tailed deer. They're pretty harmless unless they're startled. Now, the elk are different. You definitely want to keep your distance from them, especially during rutting season. Jaime scrolled through her photos. Here we go. This is from when we went camping in Yellowstone last year. The hologram changed again, and suddenly the chamber was looking at what appeared to be a hellscape of geysers, boiling springs, and Jaime's family having a picnic approximately 20 feet from a herd of massive buffalo-like creatures. "What?" whispered Counselor Thepton, his gaseous form now resembling a small, terrified cloud. "Are those?" "Bison," Jaime said cheerfully. "They're actually really cool, but you have to be careful because they can run like 35 miles per hour, and they weigh about 2,000 pounds. Every year, tourists get trampled because they try to take selfies with them." "Tourists get trampled?" Dean Morgath was developing what sounded like a harmonic stutter. "Yeah, it's kind of a problem. People see them and think they're like big, fluffy cows, but they're actually wild animals with serious anger management issues." Jaime flipped to another photo. "Oh, and here's one of the hot springs we hiked to. You can't swim in them because they're like 200 degrees and full of bacteria that would literally dissolve you. But the views are amazing." The photo showed Jaime and her family standing next to what appeared to be a bubbling cauldron straight from a geothermal nightmare. All of them smiling like this was perfectly normal recreational activity. Counselor Clickson made a sound like air being slowly let out of a balloon. "Your family voluntarily travels to regions with lethal environmental hazards for entertainment? Well, yeah, that's what camping's for. Getting out in nature, seeing wildlife, dealing with the elements." Jaime's expression suddenly brightened. "Oh, I should show you the pictures from when we went hiking in Alaska last summer. We saw grizzlies, wolves, this amazing glacier calving event." "No!" The shout came from Dean Morgath, whose crystalline form was now refracting light in patterns that suggested imminent structural failure. "I mean, perhaps we could focus on your more routine, daily activities?" "Okay," Jaime said agreeably. "Well, there's school, homework, chores. Oh, and I help with the neighborhood watch program back home." "Neighborhood watch?" Counselor Velix asked weakly. "Yeah, we keep an eye out for suspicious activity, report break-ins, that sort of thing. Though mostly, it's just making sure people remember to bring in their trash cans so the bears don't scatter garbage everywhere." Jaime paused thoughtfully. "Come to think of it, the human criminals are probably scarier than the bears. At least bears are predictable." The silence that followed was so complete, it had weight. Finally, Dean Morgath found his voice. "Jaime," he said very, very carefully, "when you say human criminals, you're referring to members of your own species who have chosen to engage in antisocial behavior?" "Well, yeah. I mean, humans are the apex predators on Earth, right? We're definitely the most dangerous thing in any given ecosystem." Jaime shrugged. "That's just basic biology." If the silence before had weight, this one had its own gravitational field. Counselor Thepton managed to reconstitute himself enough to speak. You just referred to your own species as apex predators." "Well, duh," Jaime said, looking at them like they were being particularly slow. I mean, we're omnivores with tool use, complex social structures, and we've basically conquered every biome on the planet. We're at the top of every food chain we encounter. Though I guess that's probably true for most spacefaring species, right? The administrators looked at each other with expressions that somehow managed to convey both cosmic horror and the sudden realization that they might have made a terrible mistake in admitting humans to the Galactic Academy. "Jaime," Dean Morgath said, his voice now sounding like crystal wind chimes in a hurricane, "I need to ask you a very important question. The area where you grew up, this Colorado, would you describe it as a particularly dangerous or hostile region of your planet?" Jaime laughed, actually laughed, which somehow made it worse. "Colorado? No way. Colorado's pretty tame, actually. I mean, we don't have any really dangerous stuff like venomous snakes or poisonous spiders. Well, okay, we have some rattlesnakes and black widows, but not like the really scary ones you get in places like Australia or Brazil or—" "There are more dangerous regions?" Counselor Velix's voice had gone so high, it was approaching frequencies only audible to certain species of space dolphin. "Oh yeah, tons. I mean, Australia has like everything that wants to kill you. Box jellyfish, blue-ringed octopuses, saltwater crocodiles, great white sharks, taipan snakes, funnel web spiders. And that's just the stuff in and around the water. Then you've got places like the Amazon rainforest, or Siberia, or pretty much anywhere in Africa." Jaime trailed off, noticing the expressions on the faces around her. Dean Morgath was making a sound like a crystal chandelier being slowly strangled. "Jaime," he managed, "are you telling us that the region you consider tame is surrounded by areas that are significantly more hostile?" "Well, yeah, but that's just Earth," Jaime said, still not understanding why everyone looked like they were having simultaneous existential crises. "Every planet's got different climate zones and ecosystems, right? I mean, that's just basic geography." The emergency lighting in the chamber flickered, which was either a power fluctuation or the building itself having a nervous breakdown. "One more question," Dean Morgath whispered, his harmonic voice barely audible. "Your sister, the one you mentioned, is a Marine? What exactly does that mean?" Jaime brightened up immediately. "Oh, Carmen's awesome. She's Special Forces. You know, amphibious assault, wilderness survival, advanced combat training, all that cool stuff. She can kill someone with her bare hands in like 6 different ways." And that, as they say, was when Dean Morgath's crystalline form finally just gave up and cracked straight down the middle. News traveled fast in the Galactic Academy. By the time Jaime made it back to her dormitory, she had somehow become the most famous student on campus, and not in a good way. Students were literally crossing the corridor to avoid her, pressing themselves against walls like she might suddenly sprout claws and go feral. "Jaime!" Penny rushed up as soon as she entered their shared room, her dark eyes wide with concern. "What the hell happened in Xenobiology today? The entire campus is buzzing with rumors that you single-handedly traumatized Professor Kellyan's class and caused a diplomatic incident." "I have no idea," Jaime said, flopping down on her bed, with the exhaustion of someone who'd spent the last 3 hours trying to convince a panel of alien administrators that she wasn't a psychological threat to galactic security. "All I did was mention that mountain lions aren't that scary compared to my backyard at home." Penny stared at her. "Your backyard?" "Jaime, you grew up in suburban Denver. The most dangerous thing in your backyard was probably your mom's rose bushes." "Okay, first of all, we lived in the foothills, not downtown Denver. And second, have you forgotten about the time that Black Bear got into our garage and destroyed Dad's workshop? Or when that mountain lion killed Mrs. Henderson's cat, literally 15 feet from our back door? Penny's face went through several interesting expressions before settling on something between disbelief and dawning horror. Jaime, are you telling me you've been casually living with apex predators your entire life and just never mentioned it? They're not apex predators, Jaime protested. They're just wildlife. Normal Colorado wildlife. A knock at the door interrupted them. When Penny opened it, they found Korath standing in the hallway, his amphibious skin cycling through what appeared to be every color in the visible spectrum, plus a few that probably weren't. Jaime, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to apologize for my reaction in class today. I realize now that I may have overreacted to your descriptions of your homeworld's fauna. Korath, you really don't need to. No, please, let me finish. He took a deep, shaky breath. After speaking with several other students, we've come to realize that perhaps we've been sheltered in our understanding of what constitutes normal planetary ecosystems. Behind him, Jaime could see a small crowd of other students had gathered in the hallway. Glimmer was there, flickering nervously. Thunk was still sporting several stress fractures. Wisp had formed herself into what appeared to be a small, anxious dust devil. We wanted to ask, Korath continued, if you might be willing to share more about your homeworld's survival strategies. For educational purposes, of course. Jaime looked at Penny, who shrugged in a way that suggested she was as confused as Jaime was. Sure, I guess. I mean, there's not much to it. You just use common sense. Don't approach wild animals, secure your food and garbage, make noise when you're hiking so you don't surprise anything, carry bear spray in certain areas. The crowd in the hallway had grown larger. Students were pulling out recording devices. Bear spray, repeated Clicks, who had somehow managed to uncurl from her defensive position. You mentioned this before. It's a chemical deterrent for ursine megafauna. Yeah, it's basically super concentrated pepper spray. Though, like I said, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you just have to wait for the bear to get bored and leave on its own. Glimmer flickered brighter. And your family maintains this dangerous coexistence voluntarily? It's not dangerous if you're careful, Jaime said, starting to feel like she was repeating herself. I mean, statistically, you're way more likely to be hurt in a car accident than killed by a wild animal. Car accident? Wisp rustled inquiringly. Yeah, vehicle collisions. Humans die in those all the time, like 38,000 people a year in the U.S. alone. Jaime paused, noticing that her audience was looking increasingly disturbed. But that's just because we have a lot of cars, not because driving is particularly dangerous. She trailed off as she realized she was making it worse again. 38,000, Thunk rumbled, his rocky voice carrying undertones of geological distress. Your species considers this acceptable losses for transportation convenience? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of bad, Jaime admitted. But we also save way more lives than we lose because of cars, ambulances, fire trucks, getting people to hospitals quickly. Hospitals, Korath said faintly, for treating injuries sustained from routine existence on your homeworld? Jaime was starting to suspect this conversation wasn't going in a helpful direction. Her phone buzzed, a video call from home. Oh, that's my mom, she said, grateful for the interruption. Mind if I take this? She worries if I don't check in regularly. She answered the call, and suddenly her mother's face was projected on her tablet screen. Maria looked exactly like an older version of Jaime. Warm brown eyes, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing what appeared to be gardening clothes. "Hi, Mija," her mom said brightly. "How are your classes going? You look tired." "Hi, Mom. Classes are fine. Just had kind of a weird day. How's everything at home?" "Oh, the usual. Your father's still trying to repair the deck after that elk ran through it last week. And guess what? We have new neighbors." Jaime perked up. "Really?" "The Hendersons finally moved." "Yes, and the new family seems very nice. Military, I think. The husband mentioned he just retired from the Navy. SEALs, I believe he said. Very polite man. Helped me fix the fence after Bertha knocked it down again." In the hallway, several students made choking sounds. "That's nice, Mom. What about—" "Oh, and Carmen called yesterday. She's doing well, though she couldn't say much about her current assignment. Something classified. You know how it is. But she did mention she'll be home for Christmas if her deployment schedule allows it." "Deployment?" Jamie's heart sank a little. "She's not going somewhere dangerous, is she?" Her mother laughed. "Mija, your sister is a Force Recon Marine. Everywhere she goes is dangerous. That's literally her job. But don't worry, she's very good at what she does." Behind Jaime, someone made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Anyway," her mom continued, "I should let you get back to your studies. Oh, but before I forget, Danny wanted me to tell you about the mountain lion tracks he found this morning. They go right through our backyard and around the house. He's convinced it's the same one that got the Petersons' dog last month." "Mountain lion tracks," Jaime repeated, suddenly very aware of her audience. "In our yard. Right up to the back door, apparently. Your brother's excited because he thinks he'll get to see it. I told him absolutely not. But you know Danny." "Yeah, I know Danny," Jaime said weakly. "Well, I love you, sweetheart. Study hard and remember to eat actual food, not just those energy bars you like." "Love you too, Mom. Tell Dad and Danny I said hi." The call ended, leaving Jaime staring at a black screen and very aware of the complete silence in the hallway behind her. She turned around slowly to find at least 20 alien students staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror to what might have been religious reverence. "Your mother," Korith said carefully, "just casually mentioned that apex predators regularly traverse your family's property, that your sibling actively seeks encounters with them, that your sister is a member of an elite military unit, and that your new neighbors are also elite military personnel. And she called this usual," added Glimmer, her energy form pulsing with what appeared to be existential confusion. Jaime looked around at the crowd of students, all of whom were hanging on her every word, like she was describing life on the surface of an active volcano. "Okay," she said slowly. "I'm starting to think there might be a cultural misunderstanding here." "Jaime," Penny said quietly, "I think you might have accidentally convinced the entire academy that humans are basically a species of super soldiers who live in active war zones for fun." "That's ridiculous," Jaime protested. "I mean, we're not super soldiers. We're just adaptable. And it's not a war zone. It's just nature." Thunk made his grinding sound again. "Your nature includes multiple apex predators, environmental hazards, and what your mother described as usual property damage from megafauna encounters. When you put it like that—" Jaime paused, really thinking about it for the first time. "Actually, you know what? Maybe growing up in Colorado is kind of intense compared to most places in the galaxy." "Kind of intense?" Wisp had formed herself into what appeared to be a small hurricane of disbelief. Jamie's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and froze. "What?" Penny asked, noticing her expression. "It's from Carmen," Jamie said faintly. "She says her unit just got back from a training exercise in Alaska. Something about survival training in sub-zero temperatures with minimal equipment." She looked up at her audience. She attached a picture of herself and her squad mates camping in what appears to be a blizzard. They looked happy about it. The silence that followed was so profound, it could have been used as a teaching aid in advanced physics classes. Finally, Korath spoke. "Jamie," he said with the tone of someone reaching a momentous realization, "I think you may have been significantly underestimating your species' capabilities this entire time." Jamie looked at the photo of her sister grinning, while surrounded by what appeared to be a frozen hellscape, then back at her audience of terrified alien classmates. "You know what?" she said thoughtfully. "I'm starting to think you might be right about that." And somewhere in the back of her mind, she made a mental note to maybe not mention that Carmen was the mild-mannered one in the family.